And so little by little, that colored population starts to grow in South Africa. It goes by multiple different names. So Griqua is one of the names that gets adopted over time. And eventually they actually start using the term Afrikaner, which is interesting because the Boer, the Dutch who are living in South Africa, will eventually dump the name Boer and switch it to Afrikaner and basically steal Afrikaner from the Griqua, from the colored population. And so I guess they realized it sounded cool. And they just grabbed it and took it as their national identity. So if you're reading old stuff, when it refers to Afrikaner, make sure you know which are they, do they mean the mixed kids or do they mean the white kids?
Yeah. What did white people not claim? South Africans. Time's up. A white person cannot be an Afrikaner. The first group of people to ever call themselves Afrikaners were the Orlams people, who in this day and age we call colored people. These are Orlam leaders. The original Afrikaner. The term Afrikaner came from their leader, Oude Ram Afrikaner. This clan consisted of mixed race descendants. The Khoi Khoi, slaves from Madagascar, India, and Indonesia. Can you guess what language they spoke? Afrikaans. Now this is for the people who say, but Afrikaans is derived from Dutch. Only much later, in the second half of the 19th century, did the Cape Dutch adopt this attribution. They then wiped them of that term Afrikaner. They were then renamed Coloureds by the British administration. It is documented in history that the Afrikaners came into conflict with the Dutch East India Company. Oude and his son were then banned from the Cape Colony and sentenced to life in prison. After Oude died, his son became one of the first prisoners of Robben Island. By the way, this son of Oude was actually named Afrikaner. We're gonna fast forward. His second son, Glass, was then exonerated and led the clan from the Cape Colony all the way to Namibia. It was only 200 years after the birth of Oude Ram Afrikaner that the descendants of certain white settlers decided to call themselves Afrikaners and accepted Afrikaans, the language of the bastards, as they would say, as their own. In asking why they needed to do this, the obvious answer is there must have already been people who called themselves Afrikaners and a language called Afrikaans that this new association wanted to both distinguish themselves from. Not only that, they wanted to lay claim to the term and the language for themselves. Many of them from the Boer Constitution refused this because they wanted to maintain High Dutch as their language. They were so disgusted that they were now going to be associated with the Hottentots. Have you heard a colored person speak Afrikaans? And have you heard a white person speak Afrikaans? The two speak two different kinds of Afrikaans. Because the original Afrikaans sounds nothing like the Afrikaans we speak today. Colored people still have ties to the original Afrikaans. Even though society tries to tell us that the Afrikaans that white people speak is the correct Afrikaans. The original Afrikaans had a little twinkle of Dutch, and that's because they raped the slaves that they brought to the Cape. You see why I say colored history is very similar to African American history? They dissected and stripped coloreds of everything that they were. And this is why black people need to take it easy on coloreds.
Consider the global diaspora. Indians, whether first, second, or third generation, often retain a strong sense of Indian identity, regardless of where they reside. The same holds true for many other groups. Chinese communities worldwide maintain cultural ties and identity across generations and borders. Japanese identity persists globally, often through cultural practices and community connections. Africans in various countries around the world frequently identify strongly with their ancestral heritage. Arab identity, too, transcends national boundaries, rooted in shared language and culture. Now, let us consider a different historical context. European settlers arrived in various parts of the world, establishing new communities. In southern Africa, for instance, descendants of Dutch, German, and French settlers developed a distinct identity, often referred to as Afrikaner. They claimed this land and identity as their own, separate from their European origins. This raises a fundamental question about the nature of identity formation and belonging. European settlers are not Afrikaner. Is identity solely a matter of self-declaration and connection to a new land? Or is it inextricably linked to ancestral heritage and historical context? How do we reconcile the persistent transnational identities of many diasporic groups with the claims of new localized identities formed through settlement? What are the implications of these differing perspectives on belonging and nation?
That's a wrap, folks. But before you go, keep this in mind. Their smoke and mirrors are just theatrics, pulling your focus from what truly matters. The real fight? It's always been about the land and the economy. Stay sharp, stay woke, and we'll catch you next time.
The most important person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come. Steve Jobs.